Spider-Man has been reimagined countless times over the years. We've had high school Peter Parker, multiverse Spider-Man, animated Spider-People, and even darker versions of the character. But I don't think anyone expected one of the most unique and entertaining adaptations of the character to come from Nicolas Cage, playing an aging, hard-boiled detective in 1930s New York. Spider-Noir, developed by Oren Uziel and Stephen Lightfoot for MGM Plus and Prime Video, takes one of Marvel's most interesting alternate universe characters and turns him into an 8-episode detective thriller that feels as much inspired by Humphrey Bogart and the Maltese Falcon as it does by Spider-Man. And honestly, I absolutely loved it. This is one of the best things Sony has produced in years, one of Nicolas Cage's strongest performances in a long time, and proof that not every superhero story needs to connect to a giant cinematic universe. Now let's talk more about this wonderful show. Spider-Noir follows Ben Reilly, an aging private investigator living in 1930s New York City. Years earlier, he was the city's only superhero, known simply as the Spider. After tragedy struck and his fiancée was murdered, Ben walked away from his life as a masked vigilante. But when a mysterious new case lands on his desk, old enemies and old wounds begin resurfacing, forcing him to become the Spider once more. What's refreshing about Spider-Noir is that it isn't trying to be another origin story. Ben is already broken, he's cynical, he's bitter, he's sarcastic, and he's already had his great tragedy, as it were, and he's already fallen from grace. This is essentially a detective story first and a superhero story second, and that's exactly why it works. Spider-Noir actually had a quite interesting history. Sony had wanted to expand its Spider-Man universe onto television for years, following the success of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Producers Phil Lord and Christopher Miller felt that Spider-Man Noir was one of the best and easiest concepts to adapt because the character already stood apart from the traditional Spider-Man mythology. The project was announced in 2023, with Oren Uziel developing the series before Stephen Lightfoot, the showrunner behind Marvel's The Punisher, joined the project. Originally titled simply Noir, Sony eventually renamed it to Spider-Noir to strengthen the connection to the Spider-Man brand. The series consists of 8 episodes and was filmed in Los Angeles between 2024 and 2025. Now, one of the coolest production decisions was creating 2 completely different versions of the show. Viewers can either watch the series in color or in black and white. The production team actually filmed and processed the footage specifically to make both versions feel authentic. The color version is deliberately oversaturized, inspired by classic paintings like Edward Hooper's Nighthawks. The black and white version embraces the classic detective cinema with deep shadows and stark lighting. Honestly, this might be one of the coolest creative decisions I've ever seen in a television show. Although apparently it did cost an absolute fortune to do this, so I hope they get their money's worth. Now let's talk Nicolas Cage. Initially, I honestly thought he was too old for the role, and frankly, I have been put off Cage over the last few years because he does tend to act in, well, let's be called it frankly, a lot of rubbish. Frankly, other than the unbearable weight of massive talent, Cage really has had a lot of misses. So initially, I just wasn't sold. But within the first episode, I completely changed my mind. Cage has one of the strangest careers in Hollywood. He's an Oscar winner for Leaving Las Vegas. He starred in classics like The Rock, Face Off, and Con Air. Then financial troubles led him to accept almost any role that came his way. Eventually, Nicolas Cage became more of a meme than a movie star. Another crazy Nicolas Cage performance became a joke. But Spider-Noir reminds everyone why he became a star in the first place. He approaches Ben Reilly as though he's 70% Humphrey Bogart and 30% Bugs Bunny. It's ridiculous, it's over the top. Sometimes he absolutely overacts. Sometimes he becomes a little too Nicolas Cage. But somehow, within this universe, it works perfectly. He's leaning into every detective cliche imaginable. The trench coat, the gravelly narration, the constant wisecracks, the dramatic speeches. He almost is playing a parody of a classic noir detective while still making you genuinely care about the character. And he really turns out an absolutely fantastic dynamic performance, something I didn't expect from Cage later in his career. Now, Brendan Gleeson is once again here, absolutely superb as Silvermane. Playing the Irish mob boss in his native accent, Gleeson gives the character intelligence and menace. He's philosophical, he's dangerous, and he's unpredictable. Every scene he's in carries weight. I thought he plays an absolutely outstanding villain, but that's no surprise coming from an actor of his stature. Lamorne Morris is excellent here as Robbie Robertson. His chemistry with Cage is fantastic, and Robbie's optimism contrasts perfectly against Ben's cynicism, and the two have some genuinely funny exchanges throughout the series. Karen Rodriguez is wonderful as Janet Ruiz. She's not simply a secretary, she's Ben's confidant and investigative partner, and her chemistry with Cage really grounds the show emotionally. Jack Huston is another standout here as Flint Marko, better known as the Sandman. He's one of those actors who just belongs in period dramas. Fans of Boardwalk Empire will know exactly what I mean. He has this old Hollywood quality about him that fits perfectly within this world. Abraham Pulula also does a great job here as Tombstone, bringing both physical presence and emotional depth to the role. Now, initially I wasn't entirely convinced by Lee Jun-lee as Kat Hardy, but as the series progresses, she completely wins you over. She's charismatic, she's mysterious, her nightclub performances are genuinely excellent. She has great chemistry here with both Cage and Houston. The inspirations behind the character, from Lauren Bacall to Rita Hayworth, are very obvious, and she absolutely owns the role. I also have to mention Andrew Lewis Caldwell as Dirk Layton, or Megawatt. His ridiculously exaggerated transatlantic accent is hilarious, and he's wonderfully over the top in the role, and he really just sinks his teeth into every single scene that he's in. And honestly, that's exactly what the show needed, not to hold back, but to go full tilt. Now this is where Spider-Noir truly shines. The costumes are fantastic, the production design is beautiful, the lighting is gorgeous. Every frame feels like it could have been pulled from an old detective novel or a classic Hollywood film. The narration, the cigarette smoke, the long shadows, the jazz music, the rainy streets, and even the old cars. Everything combines to create one of the most visually distinctive superhero shows ever made. Watching it in black and white almost feels like watching a lost detective film from the 1930s. I would actually recommend experiencing both versions. Some scenes, particularly Kat Hardy's nightclub performances, look spectacular in colour, but overall, I think the black and white is the definitive experience. It adds another layer of mystery and atmosphere that simply enhances the storytelling. Now, another major strength of the show is its writing. The series embraces detective fiction wholeheartedly. The internal monologues, the mysterious clients, the corruption, the double crosses, the femme fatales, the mobsters, is all here. As someone who enjoys detective novels and noir stories, this was an absolute treat. The easiest comparison I can make is to Perry Mason meeting a comic book. The show never loses sight of the fact that it's supposed to be fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It understands how ridiculous some of these concepts are and embraces them. At the same time, there are emotional moments that genuinely work. Ben's grief, his regrets, his loss of love, his struggle to move forward. They all add emotional depth beneath the stylish surface. But perhaps my most favorite aspect of the writing is that Spider-Noir doesn't feel the need to connect to a bigger cinematic universe. There's no setup for 20 spin-offs, no endless cameos, no giant crossover event. It's simply telling one self-contained story, and that's incredibly refreshing within this larger comic book world. Now, Nicolas Cage previously voiced Spider-Man Noir in the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse films. The series isn't connected to that version, but it is great finally seeing him play the character in live action. The production used specialized black and white cameras and filters to recreate the look of classic noir cinema. The character isn't Peter Parker but Ben Reilly, a significant departure from the comic books. But there are references that he could be the real Peter Parker, in this universe anyway, as Ben Reilly seems to be an alias, or alluded to at least. Nicolas Cage based his performance on Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney, and Edward G. Robinson. And if a second season happens, the creators have already suggested exploring World War II. Now, Spider-Noir has just been a big surprise for me. I wasn't sure what to expect. I thought Nicolas Cage might be too old. I wondered whether the noir concept could sustain an entire series. I questioned whether Sony could actually pull it off after some of their big misses. But it absolutely works. The performances are excellent, the production values are stunning, the writing is clever, the atmosphere is unforgettable, and Nicolas Cage delivers one of his best performances. Yes, occasionally he does go full Nicolas Cage. Yes, he does overact, but that's kind of part of the charm. Spider-Noir embraces its weirdness, it embraces its influences, it embraces classic detective fiction. And the result is something genuinely unique in superhero genre. I'd love to see more superhero films and series focus on the story before the franchise. I'd actually prefer it if Sony left it completely separate from the MCU and the larger Spider-Man universe. Just let it exist as its own strange, stylish detective series set in the 1930s. Because honestly, sometimes a great standalone story is all you need. Spider-Noir gets a 9 out of 10. If you're a fan of classic detective stories, old Hollywood cinema, Nicolas Cage, or simply want a fresh take on Spider-Man, this is absolutely worth your time. And if you can, watch it in black and white. Trust me, that's where the magic really happens. So what did you think of Spider-Noir? And which version did you prefer? The black and white version or the color one? Please let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.